In today's Photoshop assignment, you're going to create a document which illustrates the direction of light. Backlight, side light, front light, and either spotlight or starburst, your choice. Begin by making sure that you have the Photoshop program activated. When you click in Photoshop, you'll notice the word Photoshop in your top ribbon. Choose File, New, title your document, create a document with a width of 800 pixels, a height of 800 pixels, a resolution of 300 pixels per inch, and use CMYK for your color mode. Then click OK. This brings up a blank document. I'd like you to use the gradient tool for a background. Click on the gradient tool and be sure that the first option is selected. On the top option bar, you may select your type of gradient. You have 4 options to choose from: diamond, reflective, angle, radial, or linear gradients. When you click on the color of the gradient, it brings up your gradient editor. The preset I chose to use has 3 colors. I was able to change the center color by clicking on the color stop and the color that is associated with that color stop. That brings up your color picker. You're then able to use any color you wish in your gradient. When you're satisfied, click OK. Then simply draw a line across your document to achieve a gradient background. The next step will be to put a title on. Start by adding a layer. Choose at the bottom right of the layer panel, choose New Layer, and the Type tool. If you simply click on your document with the Type tool, it's an easier way to create text than dragging a box. Once you have your letters in, you may select the entire line by clicking 3 times between any letters. When it's highlighted, you may change your font, the size, the style, the placement, the color, the angle, and the placement within a document. I'm going to change my letters to white. Simply click on the color box and the color picker box opens again. This time I would like the letters to be white and say OK. I'm going to add one more effect. I may do that in 2 ways. At the bottom of the layer panel, there's an FX. The FX stands for Effects panel. Or you may go up to Layer, Style, and choose Stroke. When the stroke panel comes up, you'll see what happens is that your letters get an outline. I'd like to make that outline a little bit less prominent. By dragging the size down, I can create the look that I want. I'd also like to bring a color in from my background. So I click on the color, and by dragging across to my document, I'm able to get an eyedropper and match that color directly from my document. Selecting OK. I'd also like to add bevel and emboss, an outer glow, and drop shadow. Some of these effects are a little more intense than I'd like, so I'm going to make some adjustments. By clicking on the letters drop shadow, it brings up the structure and quality box. I can then change that by lowering the distance from my letters. And the same thing with outer glow. I'd like to bring that glow down just a little bit. On bevel and emboss, I'm going to reduce the size of the bevel. That looks pretty good, so I'll say OK. The last thing that I want to do to my letters is change the size. The quickest way to do that is through the Transform tool, Command T. By holding down the Shift, I maintain the perspective of the size and shape of the letters and dragging from the corner. Once I have the size, I can reposition the box with the Transform tool. When I'm satisfied, I hit Return, and my title is finished. Next, I'm going to add a picture. Open your picture by selecting File, Open. My picture that I want to use is on the desktop. Now I'd like to use just a portion of this picture. So I'm going over here to my selection tool and I'm choosing the elliptical marquee. What I need to illustrate in this photo is the idea of spotlight. Notice how the sun is spotlighting a portion of the water and the beach. So I'm going to grab a selection of this such that that illustration is still available. Remember to hold down your mouse when you drag your marquee tool. If you push the space bar, you can move the selection. And if you let go of the space bar, the selection acts as a rubber band where you can stretch it and shrink it. I want to stretch it a little bit to include that sun. And I want to move it just a little bit. So I'm going to reposition it. And that looks pretty good. Once I'm happy with the position and size of my selection, I simply let go of the mouse. Now I've made my selection. I need to go to the Move tool, and the shortcut for the Move tool is V. With the Move tool, I'm going to drag it to my already pre-titled direction of light. Hold the mouse down, do not let go of your mouse. Select that image, wait till it changes, bring it back, and you can, if you hold the Shift key, it'll drop it in the center. Now that image is way too large for my preset document. So I'm once again going to use the Transform tool to reduce the size. Command T brings up the Transform box. By holding down the Shift and grabbing the corner, I'm able to resize, maintaining the perspective of the picture. That's a pretty good size. And I'm going to place it right about there. Once I'm happy with the size, I hit return. My transformation is done. I'd like to add some effects. Again, back to the layer panel to the effects button, and I'm going to bevel and emboss. Bring that down just a little bit. I'd like to add an outer glow and drop shadow. Those two are just a little bit intense, so again I'm going to select that and bring down that size of the glow, as well as the size of the distance of the drop shadow. I'd like you to take a minute and play with the styles that are your options. For instance, if you added stroke to this picture, you could add a border. Again, you can play with the size and distance. Make sure that you select the word so that you bring up that style's control box. You can make a really large border, or you can bring it down very small. I'm choosing not to have a border around this picture, so I just simply uncheck the box. Once I'm happy with the effects and the style that I've provided to my picture, I just select OK. It's very important that you add a title here. There's going to be a time when you're going to want to move your images around. If they're not labeled, they're very hard to find. Simply click on the layer in the layer panel, double click brings up this option to change the name. This is Rochelle and Emily. Or perhaps I could have called it Spotlight Image, but I'm going to have another label for Spotlight. Now I'm going to add another layer and add my title, my subtitle. Click and type. Click 1, 2, 3, highlights, and I'm going to change that to a simpler text, not to outdo my title. I'd also like it to be a little bit smaller. So I can go up here and choose a 12-point font. By grabbing my Move tool, I can move that text anywhere I'd like. It probably would have been a good idea while I had it highlighted to go ahead and change the color. You need to have 4 pictures.